I was told off for starting the last hearing too quickly. Nobody was ready. I will call this meeting to order. This is the September 19th, 2018 meeting of the Shelburne Development Review Board. And 7 o'clock. So the first item on our agenda, as always, is public comment on any item not otherwise included on the agenda. I was surprised last meeting when there was public comment, but you know, normal service has been resumed and nobody wants to say anything. And I, at this point, will also ask any members of the board if they need to recuse themselves or have any conflicts of interest of any items on the agenda tonight.
Yes, on item 7.
So Ian's recusing himself from item 7.
And I will as well.
Okay. The easier way. Just a reminder to everybody who is here to please sign in so we know who is here. I can't. Shout.
Can you turn up like a little bit? Alright, thanks.
Next item on our agenda is approval of minutes. And today we have the minutes from the September 5th, 2018 meeting. Does anybody have any comments?
On the top of page 12, the voting was not unanimous. It was 5-2.
Yeah.
And then for clarity on the second paragraph of page 4, for the to prepare a final plan application for SUB 18-02, if we can remove the words 3 lot, just for clarity.
Okay, yeah. So it should just read SUB 18-02 for a subdivision at.
Correct.
Yeah. Good call. Anything else? Okay, well, hearing nothing else, I will make a motion to accept the minutes of the September 5th, 2018 meeting as written with the 2 amendments mentioned.
Second?
Seconded by Lisa. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye. So the next item on our agenda is application SUB 17-03, which was continued from our last meeting. This is an application by Alan Kirkpatrick for final plan review of a proposed 2-lot subdivision. The property at 6747 Spear Street is located in the residential district and the Stormwater overlay district. And this was continued from our last meeting for us to do a site visit, which just happened about an hour ago. And is there anything that the applicant would like to add? Yes, you should be sworn. Anybody who wants to comment should be sworn in. Do you hereby swear or affirm that the evidence that you will give in the cause under consideration shall be the whole truth and nothing but the truth under the pains and penalties of perjury?
I do.
I do, so help me God.
Thank you.
So I'm Chris Gallo, Postal Engineering Associates, and as you said, we just had a site walk or site visit at around 6 o'clock to look at Alan's property, and I think discuss kind of the one main item that's left on this application is in regards to the requirement of a sidewalk or alternate facility, and how the interpretation of those rules can be made. As part of the application, I'll introduce Alan's attorney, Norm Smith, who has more information on the sidewalk.
I've drafted a hearing memorandum to try to address the sidewalk issue, so I'm going to submit this. I've got the original here for you. I have copies for each of you. So it seems the final issue that really needs to be addressed is this whole business of a path or sidewalk that should be required. And that's contained in section 1900.7B, which talks about requiring paved sidewalks being required along the public and private streets and roads of the project. But it also goes on to say that the board can allow an alternative facility to achieve the purposes of that. Nowhere is alternative facility defined. So, but if you go back to the introduction of Article 9, it states that it's intended to promote multimodal conductivity within the sites, between adjacent sites and neighborhoods, and to transit and public roads. So, I mean, I guess this is a two-lot subdivision where there are no other paths or sidewalks or other facilities for connecting these lots to others. So, I mean, to say that putting a path on Allen's property is going to facilitate connection with other lots really doesn't cut it. So, and I think we've pointed out the town already widened Spear Street to include a 5 or 6 foot apron along the border, and it's our position that that can serve as the alternate facility for the board to choose. There are a lot of different issues with respect to having to put, if there were a sidewalk put on or a path put on Allen's property. For one thing, it would probably result in the removal of most of the trees, as you've seen when we were at the site visit, and that goes against what the natural board committee was advocating. They like the border of the trees to kind of keep that away from the house, away from the site. The other thing is you have to look towards the future and see, where is this sidewalk going to lead? All the properties along there have been pretty much developed, so it's not likely you're going to be able to require additional paths from clients as part of applications. If you go further north to the Meck Farm Road, as I point out in the petition, as I did at the site visit, there's an Act 250 permit as part of the Meck Farm subdivision that prohibits the removal of any of the brush along Spear Street or trees, that buffer zone, without getting District Commission approval. So I just wrestle with what is the purpose of this path. It's going to be a path to nowhere, because you're not going to be able to put paths north or south, and if you try to go further north towards Bishop Road, most of those properties are already tied up. So, I mean, I guess I understand the board's concern and difficulty in dealing with this issue of having an alternative facility, but I think you have one, and I think that the board, given the law, given the situation, can accept that as an alternative facility. I mean, Alan will point out, as in discussions with Alan, if we put a sidewalk there, it would be the only sidewalk between Mount Philo Road in Charlotte and Williston Road in Burlington. Okay?
Joanna, please note that the items that the council has provided will be entered as evidence exhibit A for the hearing memorandum, B for Article 19 of the Shelburne zoning regulations.
I attached the sections of the zoning ordinance to the memorandum so that you wouldn't have to be pawing through the 252 pages of the zoning ordinance.
And Exhibit C for the land use, for the Act 250 land use permit, as well as Exhibit D for Rhodes v. Georgia, 166 VT 153.
Which is the case that I referred to in the memorandum. So I also want to be sure that you received the letter that I had submitted back 2 weeks ago. Did you receive that as well? Thank you.
Anything else from the applicant?
So in the last couple of weeks, I went to a PATHS committee meeting, and I also went to a planning commission meeting. I've been to, this is my third DRB meeting, and it seems like the bylaws are putting the, making these requirements too early in the process. You know, the Paths Committee in particular seemed very frustrated with the progress of putting paths in the town, and I can appreciate why. You know, and what I see is that there needs to be a feasibility study first with costs in the study, and then a plan can be implemented, and then then it can be written into the bylaws. You know, it seems like it's been done backwards to me. So that's about all I have for you. I'm thinking about joining the Paths Committee, though.
Is there anybody in the audience who would like to make any comments? No? Any members of the board have? Oh, sorry. Passed on too quickly.
Hi, Jason Grignon, Planning Commission.
Did we swear you in?
You can.
Do you swear or affirm that the evidence that you will give in the cause under consideration shall be the whole truth and nothing but the truth under the pains and penalties of perjury?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was just asked to come here and make some comments. There's nothing officially that the Planning Commission can do on this timeline. Just for a little bit of history, this originated out of, there were some challenges where the DRB was working through some issues and asked for some clarity, and that's where this bylaw change came from. And the way that committees change, things are always morphing and evolving and that sort of thing. So I just wanted to say from a personal standpoint, I understand that this is I don't want to use the word unfortunate, but it is an example of things that happen that require, okay, well, let's reevaluate what was done so that we can do what makes sense. And so I think at least from my read on it, the language is what was determined at the time and was agreed upon. It does appear to me that the alternative facility is there. I did just want to clarify that from a sidewalk perspective, because we keep coming back to the sidewalk, that the alternative facility was put in for that purpose because it didn't make sense just to have a sidewalk in one place. I can say that the broader vision that was influencing that conversation had to do with wanting to have some interconnectivity, and I would absolutely encourage you to join the Paths Committee. Thanks. Because these are challenges that the town will need to address at some point. So the idea was you can't just instantly have paths going everywhere, but as developments happen, you can start carving out space so that can eventually be a possibility. So I was asked to come and give some comment. I don't know if there were any particular questions or anything, but that was what I have to add.
Questions?
I think we have to reserve comment to just this particular application, but would love to have a discussion with you about the broader picture.
Sure.
Okay. I don't know the best way of facilitating that. Maybe, Robbie, we can get with you afterwards and we can brainstorm and come up with at least a board recommendation to all of the town, or to many of the town committees, including the select board.
Yeah, I'd like to see I would be a supporter of integration between those conversations just so that everybody's on the same page. And I understand the challenge as well when you have turnover with volunteer committees and commissions. So whatever we can do to make this smoother to avoid these types of situations, I'm all for.
Thank you.
Thanks. May I just say a few more words?
Yep.
It just seems to me that this provision is intended for large multi-lot subdivisions, not a subdivision like this. You have 30 lots, and yeah, you want to have paths around in it to get around in there, but this is 2 lots along Spear Street, and it just doesn't seem it's intended for this kind of project. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments, discussion?
I would just like to comment from, the site visit and my interpretation of the regulations that what I saw out there, meets the criteria of an alternative facility.
Yeah. As in the widened
Yep.
verge curb. Okay. So I'm thinking then that I will make a motion to finalize the record. Do that first, because that's easy.
A second.
Thank you. And then perhaps, as we've done a couple of times recently, we will, oh, I'm sorry, we do have to vote. All those in favour? Aye, thank you. Then I'm thinking we'll do what we've done a couple of times recently, which is we will indicate that we will prepare a decision indicating approval, but we will discuss the details of that decision, specifically our thoughts about the alternative facility, and put that in writing. Does that make sense?
Sounds good.
Okay, so then my second motion will be to move to direct staff to prepare a decision indicating approval of final plan application SUB 17-03 for a two-lot subdivision at 6747 Spear Street, and the conditions will be as set out in our written decision, which will be issued in a timely fashion. That's my motion.
Second.
Is that- All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye.
All right.
So I just think that we need to discuss, and rather than do it here, we'll, yeah.
I know it's late.
Thank you.
you.
Thank you. Thank you for keeping me on track. Okay. So before we move on to the next item, I just want to remind everybody that if you could please sign in so that we know who is here. So the next item on our agenda is application SP 99-01R1, CU 99-05R1, and there has been a request to continue this application. So, seeing no reason not to do so, I will make a motion to continue the application I just recited to our next meeting, which will be October 3rd. Seconded by Lisa. All those in favour? Aye. Right.
Did we need to second that?
Oh, Lisa did.
Oh, you did? Okay, I didn't hear it. Okay.
So the next item on our agenda is application SUB 18-01. We are a little early. This is an application by Peter Ewing for a preliminary plan review of a proposed four-lot residential planned unit development. The property at 300 Cheesefactory Lane is located in the rural district. Is there anybody here to speak to this application? Yes, okay.
Pete Ewing from the Ewing Farm, residing at 21 Old Homestead Road in Westford, Massachusetts.
Okay. Could you raise your right hand, and anybody else who's going to testify also? I will swear everybody in at once. Do you hereby swear or affirm that the evidence that you will give in the matter under consideration shall be the whole truth and nothing but the truth, under the pains and penalties of perjury?
I do.
I do.
Thank you.
And this is John Binhammer from the Nature Conservancy.
Okay.
Do you want me
Okay,
to
so-
open up with a few comments?
Absolutely.
Well, I don't really have much to say. It's 3 lots in Shelburne, 1 lot in South Burlington. We've received our preliminary plan approval from the town of South Burlington. That discussion was mainly about the 20-foot road. And so that was all worked out, and we've since heard from your fire department. They want us to continue the road exactly as it's to be built in South Burlington, which of course is no problem. The fire department also made some recommendations about widening and turn radius, and of course that's no problem. This project includes about 40 acres to be conveyed to the Nature Conservancy in Shelburne. There's more in South Burlington, but roughly about 40 acres in Shelburne. And 45 acres we hope to be conveyed to the Vermont Land Trust and the Bread and Butter Farm, all of which is in Shelburne. And so all told in Shelburne, then that would be about 85 acres going into conservation land. And I think the final count on the 3 lots in Shelburne was about 17 acres to be subdivided into 3 lots, 3 houses. So it said here that we don't know our exact conservation amounts, but that's it right there. I don't have a calculator. I think it was 17.85 with 3 lots and 85 conservation land. So, you know, if you remember from our earlier presentation, the process started by, you know, because of our location next to the Shelburne Pond Natural Area. It was always a high priority for our parents, for my parents, to conserve the land. And we started working with the Vermont Land Trust and Nature Conservancy back in 2015. We had an appraisal done on the farm. And so we started from looking at the conservation areas first, and then, you know, based on a lot of analysis, and the University of Vermont came in and looked at the whole area first for what would be interesting to them for a natural area, and they selected along Muddy Brook, and then the farm portions of the property were of interest to the Vermont Land Trust, and we worked from there. My mother had always wanted to retain a few lots, and the place where the 3 lots are lands that were of no interest to the Nature Conservancy of Vermont Land Trust. It's set back closer to where the houses are and closer to the road. So it all kind of worked out. So the plan was put in place while my parents were still alive. Since then, my mother passed away in May of 2017, and my father passed away in November of 2017, and so we're still following their plan and haven't changed really anything since then, and there's no intention to change the plan. I think that's all I can think of at the moment.
Any questions, comments? Okay. Is there anybody in the audience who wants to make any comments? No? Okay, Ravi, it didn't seem as if you had any concerns, apart
Yeah.
from, I mean, the fire department comments will be
Yeah.
added.
Fire department comments were added. I had some concerns about with building envelopes and setbacks that I think could be finalized with the final plan, and further defined in terms of the footage of those building envelopes and the location as well. Another thing that staff wanted to ask more about from the applicant was possible site-generated demand due to because in the filed application materials there was the text that included a parking lot in South Burlington, trail easements, as well as access for University of Vermont faculty and students to lands that are going to be protected, and whether that would require pedestrian facilities for people accessing those easements and those lands that are behind the lands that are proposed for the PUD.
I can talk to that for a second. We have had trail access to the farm forever, and it's on an old farm road, and I guess, oh, there, you can't see it from here. There's a bed and breakfast that belonged to my mother there, and you can see the road. This is the old farm road that accesses all the hay fields and everything. And so that has been used forever, going back, more than 100 years for people accessing Shelburne Pond. We had a lot of fishermen go down there. We discourage hunters, but we get a few hunters that access the property from other ways, other means. And so that has always provided a very good access, and it's actually used pretty frequently. We've proposed parking spaces, 3 parking spaces right below where the new road, the grade road starts out from the driveway there on the left in that open field. And we're proposing to put parking spaces there. There'll also be a trail easement running straight east across the top northern property line, going straight east out to Muddy Brook and the Nature Conservancy lands. While the subdivision, if you want to zoom out a little bit, we had included an easement here. It wasn't our intention to bring pedestrians up into the residential area because, it's just bringing it into where the houses are. And this other access, like I said, is been the access to Shelburne Pond for more than 100 years, and it works great. So we would continue to maintain and encourage that route. And that crosses my brother's property. He's the purchaser of the bed and breakfast. And so it stays, that access starts on our property. Actually, we've got several lots, but this is a separate lot belonging to the family. Right up here. And then the bed and breakfast starts on the town line, comes down to here. And then this is the road comes down here. And it actually, this access and this one join right here and then go down to Shelburne Pond. So we have very good hiking access to Shelburne Pond, and we would, no matter what happens, we would continue to encourage people to use what we call the old farm road. And it's an established trail. It's been, beaten down by tractors and pickup trucks forever. And so again, we would always encourage that to be the primary access for people that wanted to come out and take a walk. Definitely discouraging firearms and motorized vehicles.
So 100 years from now, it's all under new people. Will there be a legal right-of-way or legal access, some legal documentation?
There already is
farm
a
road?
legal right-of-way on that farm road for
Farm access
for
road.
UVM.
I
the
omitted
farm
that
access road.
the
Yeah.
Nature Conservancy and UVM own that access,
Thank you, okay,
which makes it, again, it's always been there.
great.
I saw Fish and Game went down there a little while ago. They know about the road and they come down and, monitor hunters in Shelburne Pond during, duck season or whatever. So it's a somewhat well-known road.
Robbie, your concern was around maybe that there'd be more traffic down the road.
Possibly more traffic, but another thing to point out, I guess, when reviewing the site plans, there is a right-of-way easement right here in the southern portion of the PUD, and whether there needed to be pedestrian facilities that would connect the single-family dwellings to that right-of-way easement or not, based on site-generated demand, or as the applicant has stated, I guess more information about how exactly the public would be accessing those lands around the PUD.
Sounds like they're not. It's UVM and
Yes.
I guess through the Nature Conservancy, public
Yeah.
access would be
So the applicant's
allowed, correct?
covered many of the bases that staff was concerned about.
We would, well, there's actually another house in South Burlington, but so 4 houses, it just makes perfect sense that everyone be able to walk to Shelburne Pond that lives here. And if people parking up here took a wrong turn or whatever, and they come up the road, it wouldn't be a big deal. But so this would be primarily for the residents, granting, Nature Conservancy, UVM, and whatever public makes their way out there to come out this road. But again, I don't see why, giving good access here, I don't see why we would encourage people to come this way and just walk into people's yards.
Would you have any concerns about identifying where the proposed parking lot would be, just for clarity for 100 years from now?
I was going to put up a metal sign and just indicate.
On here, on the diagram.
Yeah, and I can show you where that'll be.
So you should.
Can you update the prints to show that?
Right here. Yeah, I can.
Thank you.
Have a microphone here.
I'm sorry.
They get from the parking spaces.
They walk down the farmland. So the parking spots are right here. This is the public access.
And that, again, that's vacant land along the street.
No. Okay, so you would be okay updating the plots to reflect where you would want that parking to be?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I mean, what I would put on the sign, or intended to put on the sign, was, TNC, UVM,
Yeah,
parking.
that's fine.
But what I understand is that any lands owned by the Nature Conservancy are owned by the public. I don't know that I would say public parking.
I'm not worried about that. All I want to do is make sure that the prints are updated to reflect where you would want that parking to be. So it's not,
Will you put that
no
in?
doubt about it.
Thanks, sir.
That can be included into the conditions of approval for.
Yes, exactly.
Certainly.
Okay.
And I've just discussed 3 parking spaces, and we actually need that. We've got people from UVM that have been coming out there now once every couple of weeks or once a month. And it's we get a lot of visitors from UVM, and, we like that. They come out with their students and researchers, and so it's always been a good thing.
Okay.
And for our purposes, we need access to the 48 acres, 40 in Shelburne, 8 in South Burlington. And so, and it's because we're applying for funding, partial funding for this acquisition from the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board. So there will be that right-of-way that runs along the northern border of the property in South Burlington.
Yeah,
That's way off the top there. Yeah.
Here, and then down here. And then this is, and then it'll run out. No, then this is Nature Conservancy.
Yeah, so that would be the beginning of the lot,
That
yes.
gets you there.
So, yeah. So that right away will be reflected on the plan. In fact, yeah, we put a request to have that reflected already. It's somehow, it didn't get in there yet. But all the right-of-ways will be on the final plat.
And the practical access for UVM is really down the old farm road.
Yeah.
That's really where they have gone for many years and will continue to go.
Yeah.
Okay, and after the South Burlington DRB decision, there's no concern about that anymore? Like getting access?
Yes, so this hearing the noticing of this hearing was contingent upon that decision. And because staff received that decision, we believe that we could proceed with hearing this application at this moment.
So then I'll make a motion to finalise the record and close the hearing for preliminary plan application SUB 18-01. Although even as I'm saying that, I realise I did not say, is there anybody in the audience who wants to comment? See, there is. I take it back. I take my motion back for now.
Mark Saunders, reside at 148 Cheesefactory Lane.
Okay, and do you hereby swear or affirm that the evidence that you will give in the cause under consideration shall be the whole truth and nothing but the truth under the pains and penalties
So
of
do.
perjury?
So we're the property due west of the Ewing property, and my one concern, although we have not voiced it at any point is that the old part of the farm road is on our part of the property as well. And while that has access for bread and butter, it has UVM, Nature Conservancy, we don't limit any access. We're fine with it, but I would not want to be seeing increase in access through that old farm road, which cuts between our house and the Ewing's house. So I don't know how to deal with that, but now it's okay. It's just an occasional UVM truck, research students, and Bread and Butter uses it to gain access to their pastures. But I guess my one concern, you has mentioned, what happens 100 years from now, it won't be there, but whether this would be increased access, greater access to Shelburne Pond and the conserved land, and whether there'd be an increase in traffic down that dirt road. That dirt road continues on around the corner to our barn, so it's basically from the corner, it's our private road. Yeah, right there.
This is a 60-foot right-of-way. Do you want to give me the microphone?
Yes.
This is a 60-foot right-of-way on my brother's property. And Mark upgraded the road for his barn, and when he did it, the road kind of straddles the property line in this one spot, I think is what he's referring to. There's no need for, other than the fact that the road kind of veered 10 or 15 feet in the other direction, there was never a need for, for the road to go in that direction. It was, Mark upgraded the road and it, went onto his property. And so there may be a tendency for people to want to stay on the road, but we certainly, it's not necessary. We have a 60-foot right of way. We have all the right of ways that we need. So there's no reason. If it was an issue, we could simply put more gravel down and put the road back on our property.
Is there anything keeping people from driving down there right now? Is it gated or anything? Or?
No, it's not gated. Yeah, that has been a problem. Typically, our neighbors have gone down there with their pickup trucks, but we've also had a lot of people go down there. Too often we get hunters and stuff down there, and we don't really appreciate that much. But Brandon just arrived from the Bread and Butter farm, and he uses the road all the time for his cattle grazing, and he'll be, of course, he's with the Bread and Butter farm, so he actually uses that a lot. And so that's it. But there's certainly no need for anybody accessing the farm to go on the Walker's land, other than the fact that the road goes that way and people want to stay on the road. But we have, it's wide open lawn. There's no obstructions to keep people on our property.
Is that your understanding of how it works as well?
The understanding being the right of way.
There's a right of way.
Yeah, it sounds less of a right-of-way issue than it is really just an assurance of, circumstances changing in the future where there might be increased traffic or,
But there will be increased traffic.
Yeah.
Plan on
Right.
it. That's the way it's
Right.
going.
I just don't know how
We
you.
have to think about it
Well,
that
if
way.
it's going to be more known that it's open to the public.
Sure,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I think it's one thing to know who's going down the road. It's another thing to just see cars parking there and have no idea whether, if they're not UVM, because they're not sure vehicles. They're not Brandon going down to the pastures.
So how many different entities have a real reason to go down there? How many neighbors, and is it just...
We do get a lot of nature hikers, which we always encourage. As part of this process, we've just had a lot of people go down there, surveyors, you name it. That, we almost need a park just for that reason alone. But looking forward, I think, there's going to be quite a bit of nature lovers going down there.
I'm just wondering, as far as vehicles, is
Yeah.
there a way that you could control access, that people who are supposed to drive down there have a combination or something?
I'd be happy to put up, in fact, I think, thinking along the terms of what Mark might be thinking is, maybe a no motorized vehicle sign would be the first thing.
Yeah.
We'd be happy to put that up. And of course, our neighbors who, like Brandon, who work out there, obviously it wouldn't apply to them. But yeah, no, that's been a problem. We've had, for eons, we've had people, drive right past our house and go down there. We never minded, nature lovers and whatnot, but if you're a nature lover, why are you driving your pickup truck past your house?
Yeah.
So I think a no motorized vehicle sign would be a good thing.
But I guess I'm just wondering, that land is sort of officially conveyed land to Nature Conservancy, right?
Yes.
And you said earlier that that if it's conveyed to Nature Conservancy, then essentially it's public land.
He said that.
Okay.
Let me clarify a little bit. So first of all, the goal here is really to add the 48 acres in both towns to the UVM natural area. Part of the H. Lawrence Achilles natural area would be something like 1,000, almost 1,100 acres once we were able to do that. And so, and what we will do is we will hold a conservation easement on that property when that conveyance happens. So, to get to this issue, I don't know how many people use the property now. But I do know, in talking with both Rick Paradise, who was the former manager, now retired, and Nate Sanders, who's the new UVM Natural Areas Manager at UVM, they don't publicize this access. And we don't publicize this access either. The access that we publicize for Shelburne Pond is at the south end of the pond in Shelburne at the fishing access. And that's where that's where we encourage people to go. 'Cause there's a trail there, there's parking there, that sort of thing. We don't intend to publicize this, but we are applying for funding from a public source, and they require a public access easement as part of the deal. So what does that mean? It just means that we have to allow for public access. We can't post the property against public access, but we don't have to encourage it. And we're sensitive to neighbors because we have 30,000 acres around the state, and we know, we need to be sensitive to neighbors. And so we will not publicize this. If people know about it in the community, they might use it. And so that's why the compromise was, well, can we have just a few parking spaces to accommodate that traffic, not be a burden try not to be a burden to anybody in the area, and allow people to walk down the right of way.
But it sounds like, Mark, your concern's more with people driving down there. Is that?
Yeah, I'm just concerned about the increased traffic on the farm road, not the road that would be built. Now, including the parking spaces on the new road may mitigate that to some extent, but I don't know whether the whole project and the conservation aspect of it will raise the specter of more visitors and unknown visitors versus people that we know are UVM marked vehicles from the wildlife group, the state wildlife group, or agricultural use. So again, it's more of an issue of people that we don't know. And as Peter said, that though they don't advocate hunting, there are vehicles that go down there, ATV vehicles that access that land to hunt. And sometimes that's 4:30 in the morning to go turkey hunting. So I don't know whether...
Well, it sounds like the no motorized would be a start, but then if that doesn't work, maybe you need a way to keep...
I've been concerned about, motorized vehicles for, 40 years.
typically people who are driving are bringing guns, and they're going down to hunt. And, I don't mind the hunters, when they're hunting within season, but we get a lot of people doing target practice too. Sometimes it'll be at odd hours, and it'll just be rapid fire, of guns. And so, I think no motorized vehicle sign would be a good thing.
Just another FYI, technically, the UVM natural areas system doesn't allow hunting on their land. So if it's happening, it's not happening, it's not sanctioned by them.
Sounds like you might need a few signs.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that hunting is just a bygone era of the neighborhood, because the only people who hunt are relatives of neighbors. And I think it's just one of these unwritten access rules that have passed down over the years.
Did you make a motion to close the hearing?
Oh, I did, and then I withdrew it, but I can make it again. If we're sure that everybody has said everything they want to. I will make a motion to finalize the record and close the hearing for preliminary plan application SUB 18-01.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favour?
Aye. Thank you very much.
And then, thank you. And then, I will make a motion that the applicant for SUB 18-01 be authorised to prepare a final plan application. And with the recommendations as written out in the staff report, which are that in that final application, that you should include site plans depicting the buffers, the building envelopes, and the setback dimensions in accordance with the town zoning bylaws and approved by the DRB, as well as building heights. You should include, the pedestrian facilities. Where are we on that one?
Correction could be at least with right-of-way easements, because with the site plans as is right now, there are certain pedestrian right-of-way easements that are not included, and that could be provided by the applicant at the final plan stage.
Okay, makes sense.
Okay.
Yep.
As well as the parking.
It's also a requirement of the South Burlington decision too, so I'm sure they're going to end up
Okay.
there.
Yeah. You should also include site plans and/or orthographic images that show sufficient screening along the roadway and between the proposed dwellings in the final plan application. And the application should address the fire department's concerns in that letter that they submitted this week.
I'm okay with all that, though I did have a question about screenings. We have consistently, I've been waging a 20-year battle against invasive species, and it's been, and I've had a lot of help from the U.S. Department of Agriculture out in Williston, and we've been overwhelmed by buckthorn. But there's even native trees that really will come up like corn. White ash is a big problem. It's not a problem if that's what you want, but if you want to maintain open meadows and hayfields, you got to cut. So really the way that the farm has always been historically is wide open meadows, and that's good. We, in fact, have been encouraging grassland birds and stuff like that. So our objective is actually not to screen, but to keep the views open. And we only have to relent for a few years and the views just go away. The trees grow so fast. So I'm constantly cutting, hiring, brush hogging people. So it wouldn't be my objective to screen anything. I will say that the four houses, there's a lot of trees right through here. So at least during the summer, you can't see none of these houses will be visible. Is my expectation. These three, there's no chance you'll be able to see them. The trees are really tall here. This one, I don't think so, but possibly. In the winter, maybe. when the leaves are off the trees, you could actually see a roof line possibly. But that's very, very well screened. So I guess I wouldn't want to be in a situation where I'm planting trees along the road to hide the road.
Is that what you had in mind? Or?
This was more of a, DRB should ask the applicant how they plan to address town subdivision regulations, section 810, subpoint 4, that in regards to screening between the roadway and any structures, as well as landscaping in general. And we understood that this was in the rural district, so possibly there was enough natural resources that would be sufficient as screening, as landscaping, therefore that the applicant wouldn't need to submit a landscaping plan per se. However, for the final plan, it would be helpful to have more clarity on what exactly these buffers are in order to be in compliance with this condition. But with the, I guess, with the how the situation is, that to have some sort of orthographic image, to have some sort of understanding of what the natural resources are on site would be helpful in our evaluation of the final plan.
I just realized that the plan actually shows it, and I was also pointing to South Burlington. Within Shelburne, the Shelburne town line is right here, and the trees are shown here. So in terms of the views from this direction, it's very, very well screened, so I'm not sure what we'd be screening from.
Are the regulations suggesting that we screen between the homes, from home to home?
Regulations suggest screening between the homes and the right-of-way, homes and homes as well, but mostly between the homes and the right-of-way.
In terms of native species, I prefer hemlock, maple, and we've got quite a few apple trees out there. But those are all native species, and I would stick right with those. I like the combination, you know, the hemlock stays green through the winter. Everybody loves the maples, and the apple trees are wonderful, bring a lot of wildlife in.
I would want something in the spirit of what the landowners would want.
Yeah,
Let it go to nature and let them do it,
maybe
and
it's just a matter
not tie
of
it down.
Identifying, I don't know, no-cut zones or, you know, management practices or something, rather than adding.
And we'd encourage the landowners to have smaller lawns and just keep the meadows free of trees, because and that meadow in Shelburne, really where the road and the houses are, was where we got a lot of USDA funding to create bird habitat. And it was very successful, and so it's a lot of birds coming in there, and so I think we should just continue to encourage that, but it does require brush hogging. The trees come up so fast. Buckthorn primarily.
All right, so what do we do with line 3? Strike it or modify it, or leave it as is?
Will there be anything in there, in the kind of, like the deed or anything that limits cutting, or have you thought about anything like that, or?
I think Ravi sent me something along those lines, and we do definitely want something. One thing that's a little bit possibly different than some of your projects is that we're not actually proposing the actual building. And we'll probably put the land up for sale, but we do want to have some control about what's built. You know, we want some conformity, and you know, so you know, we do need to address that.
So maybe in the final
Yes.
plan, if they can lay out those restrictions, that'll satisfy.
So the language sounds pretty good. It sounds like it's in line with what we've been talking about.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think it accomplishes that, gives you the freedom what you need to do, but yet says there's certain criteria that the town has.
Okay.
So I think you're-
To note that the applicant has not provided covenants or a homeowners association agreement bylaws yet. And that is something that they can include and should include in the final plans.
Yeah, that sounds like a good idea, because like I said, we,
Yeah.
we want some conformity. We don't want somebody to come and build something totally contemporary
Yeah.
right next to, an old farmhouse style. We want to have, things, work out aesthetically.
So you can probably, make it read to provide what you want for the land too. So limiting
Sure.
the lawn areas and
Yeah,
things like
we
that.
can
so.
do that.
And I think that is noted on page 7 of the staff report, that covenants and deed restrictions are a requirement for preliminary plan. Peter and I have been in conversation that this has to be included in the final plan, and is well aware of this, but that can be included in a condition of approval that would state that this is a requirement, and also that language regarding natural resources are needed.
Okay.
So we had so 3 is good. We talked about the parking lot, putting that on the plan,
Okay, so I guess I didn't mention that. So is that number 4?
number 4.
Include the parking lot on the plan. Number 5 is the fire department requirements. And number 6 is the homeowners association agreement to be included
Okay.
with the final plan.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is that- Okay, so we will move on to item number 7 on the agenda, which is application SUB 16-02. This is an application for a preliminary plan review of a proposed 91-unit residential planned unit development. The property is at 5760 Spear Street and is located in the residential district and the stormwater overlay district. And maybe I should start by saying that my understanding is that because we have considered this preliminary plan application in stages, the majority of the application has already been considered and approved, and today we are just back because the final part of the application, which was the water supply question, is all that we're here, that's all that we're here to consider. So who would like to start by standing up and being sworn in? Anybody who wants to be heard on this should stand up now and we'll swear everybody in together. Do you all swear or affirm that the evidence that you will give in the cause under consideration shall be the whole truth and nothing but the truth under the pains and penalties of perjury?
I do.
Thank you. Who's going to start?
So my name is Chris Snyder with Snyder Homes. Thank you very much for your time again in front of the DRB. As you mentioned, this is a proposed neighborhood. We have been in front of this board for probably the last solid 2 years. Maybe we were trying to figure out if it's 3, but solid 2 years. We've had 3 hearings and 1 site visit for the overall proposal. And we did ask for partial findings and did receive partial findings approximately 9 months ago.
About a year ago.
Okay,
December 28, 2017.
Okay, so in December, and we requested an extension of the preliminary findings. And essentially, the only outstanding item was the water allocation that hadn't been resolved by the water Town of Shelburne Water Board. And with our participation and involvement, there has been a resolution that has been accepted, and the town has provided, or the water board has provided a letter of allocation for the overall neighborhood. So that is really why we're here tonight, and to close out the preliminary. We have been working since last December on all of the conditions that were requested and outlined for our final application. And so we are working on that and organizing and preparing for the final submission. And that is my comments for tonight.
Can you comment on how you're getting water? Where's it coming from? Is it all Shelburne or South Burlington?
So the water line comes along Spear Street, and it already goes to Collimer.
The water line runs on the west side of Spear Street now, and it'll run along all of the new public, as a condition of the prior review of the board. All streets will now be public, so the water lines will run along the public streets within the neighborhood, looping back onto Spear Street at both the northerly and the southerly entrance.
And it is currently coming from the Dorset Street water supply tower in South Burlington.
Thank you.
Ravi, your position is that with this final piece, with the water, they're all set, their preliminary plan is complete.
Exactly. So for this meeting, as you've mentioned, as the applicants have mentioned, that it only pertains to water, and that any other information that's outside of water, those things have already been addressed at previous hearings about a year ago, and that they are well aware of the conditions of approval from that they are intending to address in their final plans. So anything that should be readdressed regarding anything outside of water should be reviewed at the next stage.
Okay. But the next stage is the final subdivision plan.
Yes.
Okay. Any comments or questions from the board?
Pretty straightforward.
Okay. Is there anybody in the audience who would like to make any comments or ask any questions?
If I may?
Yes, so come to the microphone.
My name's Mike Lamantia, live on Boulder Hill Drive, Shelburne. And I would like to raise a question about water in a different sense. Material facts have changed about some of the original decisions that I believe the board has made previously about water runoff, which is different from water provided in terms of fire use. In the time since, we had a catastrophic runoff of water from the above property down into our neighborhood. And on May 4th, it was really quite remarkable to see this water run down the hill, overflow the catchment system in our neighborhood, flood our streets, required the town sanitation department to come through to clean up the debris and mess. I fear in the long run what will happen to our homes, to our neighborhood, if we're to add a significant number of properties in the area that are not set up in order to absorb water. And what may be said, I don't think that this argument holds water, pun intended, is that the land management plan will be better at handling water than the current golf course is. I don't see how that defies science for me, and I'm a scientist. When you're planning to put 91 units into a compact set of land like this, and you're going to add all of that macadam down, across that property, that we will not see an increase in the flow of water with rain, with thunderstorms, which are only anticipated to get worse the next 100 years, if you believe in global warming. So I think that that is a significant issue that we have to consider in regards to water. I have a number of other comments, but I'll stick to the issue of water. Thank you.
Have you had a chance to review the previous testimony over the last 2 years, specifically addressing that? Because it was discussed quite a bit.
But this was something that has happened between December, when your last meeting, and this one. I've lived here now in this neighborhood for 2 years, had never seen anything like this.
Okay.
Well, we've also seen more storms occur in the United States in the time since that we've not seen before. And so I think that this is a material change in something that the board has jurisdiction over. Thank you.
Anybody else want to comment?
Janice Nicholas. I live at 673 Mount Philo Road. I tried to bring this up a couple years ago, and I apologize if it's come up to the board on this particular project. But this used to be a golf course, and golf courses are well known to have a lot of pesticide use. And I just think it would be appropriate to test some of the soil in this area to make sure that there isn't any residue of pesticides left from past usage. This is places where kids are going to play and people are going to have gardens, so I just think it's a wise thing to do.
Okay, thank you.
I'm Roger Price. I live at 235 Boulder Hill Drive. I'm not here to talk about the storm runoff that Michael talked about, but it was a huge river that came down. But that's not my question. My question is the water. This water that's coming from South Burlington to us, my understanding is it's very expensive. And I'm curious who's paying for it and what the arrangement was between, is it called the Water Commission? What is the Water Commission and Chris? Has that been discussed, how it's being paid for?
Not with us. Maybe if you cannot contact the town water department and find out.
Well, I've been told that it has been discussed, and I'm curious.
Within the DRB, we don't.
Pardon? No, but there was an agreement, as I understand, but it was never inked by Joe Colangelo, and I shouldn't speak, but my understanding was that this was being paid for by Snyder Homes, and it's in excess. It's under $200,000, but it's a lot of money, and I don't know if that's true or not.
I don't know. Again, the water department might be able to provide you with that information.
Is it relevant for the DRB to know? No? Okay.
I don't think it is. I
It's
think
really
our,
an issue you have to take up with the water commission.
Okay, thank you.
It's nothing, we didn't have anything to do with that, so.
no, I think our concern is just.
Maybe the applicant can shed some light on that, I don't know.
I certainly can shed a little bit of light. There was an agreement between the city of South Burlington and the town of Shelburne with regards to water storage capacity. So it's not a flow of water, it's storage capacity of water. And that the town of Shelburne currently and for many years has been using the storage capacity of a tank that's located on Dorset Street in South Burlington. Unbeknownst to, I guess, anybody, it was being held in that storage tank. When the water line along Spear Street was replaced, I think people have tried to trace the location of where that water was coming from and the capacity. And it was determined that the storage was actually coming from the Dorset Street tank. And it took a couple of years, 18 months, for the town and the city to come to an agreement as to who was going to pay for the previous use of the water, which is already being used prior to our neighborhood or our proposal, and who's going to pay for it into the future. And so there is an agreement. I don't, off the top of my head, I don't know all the numbers, but we, Snyder Homes, will be contributing a substantial amount of money to pay for the storage that is currently being used on Dorset Street. And it allocates not only for this particular neighborhood, but also for the next. I think there was a growth analysis done by the town that showed how many more units would be built within this district over the next, I can't remember if it was 10 or 20 years. And so they did an analysis of that. And then that's how it's getting paid for, is through new connection fees of our neighborhood and then also future neighborhoods.
Okay, thank you.
There's
Anything
something
else?
bothering me.
Yeah.
You bring up a really good point about the pesticides and the fertilizers in the golf course.
One quick comment, but she's a.
Come to the microphone.
Dave Dummett, I live also with Jan Nicholas at 673 Mount Philo. She's a little modest. She's a PhD immunogeneticist who worked at UVM for 30-odd years in the genetic toxicology department. So she knows whereof she speaks.
So a golf course is one thing, but a neighborhood with kids playing on the lawns is a different thing. So how do we know? Our job is to make sure, we think about the safety aspect of the community. How do we know that that ground is safe? I don't know how to answer that question, but I have that question. And I don't recall this ever being talked about before in any of the testimony that we had on this.
No, I don't think it was.
No. And yeah, all that fertilizer that's been in there for years and years and years, and the byproducts that are in the soil. So the question is, at least my thoughts, that when we have to talk about it as a board, we want to make sure that when everything is all done, the neighborhood, the grounds, they're safe for little kids to play in a sandbox and to play in the dirt. So how do we do that?
Any thoughts, Ravi?
I guess, has the applicant provided evidence previously regarding soil quality, regarding possible leaching of the soil into, of anything that's toxic in the soil into the pipes, the water supply, anything that's going into the houses? I mean, have you done any studies regarding this?
I think that's something we can look at for final, but in some ways, we're trying to prove a negative here as well. It probably starts by looking at the golf course management plan and what they're applying and making sure that they're, I don't want to speak for the golf course, but I assume that they're applying it. There are regulations regarding the application of pesticides and other applications to the grounds. And I realize the board's point as far as the change in land use, and we can certainly look at that, but at least for the time being, I'm not sure as we necessarily need to prove that the golf course is in any kind of violation, but we can certainly look at the change in land use going forward and the placement of topsoil in that top layer, which people would be in contact with.
I mean, any sort of serious contamination would be the responsibility of the landowner for if there is contamination of the soil, and regarding the cleanup of that would have to be addressed at a later stage with outside evidence if this hearing continues, or if if the applicant is authorized to go into final plan. But for this hearing specifically, if the main pertinent question that comes to mind for me would be, does the soil quality affect the water quality that's coming out of people's taps? And would it?
No. No. I'm beyond that. I'm okay with the water going
Besides
to the
going
houses.
into the pipes, you got.
This is a whole different issue.
Exactly.
This is a whole different issue.
That's the only thing that comes to mind for me.
Andy, does this have to go through Act 250?
Yes.
Yes.
It seems like, I don't know Act 250 that well, but is there a requirement for soil testing?
Not a specific requirement for soil testing, but again, I think, whether it falls under the board's purview or Act 250's purview, that's something we can look at for final. There's a lot of sub-criteria to Act 250. I don't want to say that it's not something that's ever been looked at.
Sure.
You can drill down pretty deep into the 10 criteria.
I mean, to me, it seems more like an Act 250 concern.
I hope so, but I don't trust government. I'm just thinking, like 5 years from now, we'd hate to have something show up like this site was contaminated because it's been a change of use, and the use of all those things that make a golf course so green comes back to harm the families that move into these houses.
I just don't know that it's under our purview.
We have to make sure it's safe. I mean, that's one of the things. We had
I don't think there's anything in the bylaws about contaminated soils and approving development, though.
It goes to the broader picture. Yeah, it was raised by a citizen who has some credentials in that area. And my experience, just background knowledge, is there's some concern here that should be addressed. But I don't know how to do it. I don't know how to address it.
So there is,
not really
so one of the requirements whenever we purchase a property and get financing for it is that a phase 1 survey of the property must be done prior to financing. And basically what that does is there's this type of engineers that go out and do these review of the entire property, any past contaminations, any its soil, its use, its all of that, and that does get done prior to us purchasing any property.
Okay.
So that is something that obviously we take very seriously, because we don't want to buy any property that has contamination, and so.
Is there something there that then could be shared with the board and the town on findings that might suffice?
Well, it sounds like he wouldn't buy it.
But if he does buy it, that means he's got something that says it was okay.
Yeah.
So would you be able to put that as part of the final?
I think that happens
After the fact.
final.
Far down the road.
Yeah, it's usually like a couple of months before, 60 days before the purchase of the property. But
May I comment that just putting
You need to use the mic for the TV audience.
May I comment that in the spirit of transparency, that it would be good to know what that testing has shown to this point, because this argument about he wouldn't buy it if he didn't.
Well, it hasn't been done yet. It's not done until he's about to buy it.
But that he wouldn't enter into an agreement to potentially buy the property if he knew that it were contaminated. That only becomes an issue if it becomes clear that there is a problem with the property. If he keeps the results hidden and that there is a problem, or one that he just wants to sweep under the rug and not pay attention to.
excuse me.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. We don't sweep anything under the rug.
Yeah,
Let's
I
not talk about
apologize.
that. Okay.
I apologize for my
yep.
tone. I'm just trying to be in the vein of public health, trying to say that it would be good to have transparency around this issue, to see what those reports have shown. Because one could imagine a situation, potentially, where something is not disclosed, and the property sales go through, and we find ourselves in a situation many years later where we're asking the question, if we only knew better, if we only knew something different. I'm just thinking from the perspective of of complete transparency. It would be good to see those things. It'd be good to take testimony from people who are experts on this topic, if we don't have the expertise within our group here. I'm sure that there are experts up the road who would be willing to go ahead and testify on this issue.
So Jim, my thoughts are this is nothing that would hold up preliminary, but maybe something that we talk about as part of final approval. I mean, that's my thoughts. Then the public could be put at ease, and we could say we've done our job of making sure we've got a
So you're
safe
saying
development.
we're going to require testing before
Something
final?
that demonstrates that the soil is good. I don't, I wouldn't do this if it was just no, because there's been other places where the soil's been contaminated and it's had to been hauled out. Somewhere it got caught. I don't know if it was Act 250 or where that gets caught.
Usually.
And we just have to see that was done and that was addressed. I don't have the answer right now. It's my concern to my fellow board members, how we want to take that forward to the applicant. We have to decide.
More comments?
Can I say one more thing? And I wasn't going to because I'm not public about this, but 4 years ago, Damon Silverman, who's an ENT at the hospital, looked at me and said, "You have tonsil cancer." And there's no cancer whatsoever in my family, and I've always said, why is this? What is it? And I'm not suggesting it's the golf course, but it's not just kids. I really appreciate taking the time to make sure this is safe here. It's not a pretty thing to find out that kids are running around or the water's flowing down, if that is contaminated in any way.
Get them medical records of all the golfers, maybe? Or?
Maybe a lot of them.
Yeah.
My eyesight would go bad.
I just wanted to make a comment. We're not trying to obstruct the development. We just think it's very prudent for whoever is proceeding, and at some point during the proceedings, if somebody addresses this particular issue, it's not farmland, it's a golf course. And as my wife said, they use a lot of things that we don't use on our lawns, and we should be just very careful. And so I would hope that the developers, as part of their process, take the advice that's been offered today and conduct a study, have somebody come in and check before moving forward with this. I think it protects them for liability reasons down the road anyway, that this land is safe to build this kind of development on. Golf courses are different than other sources of land. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you.
I mean, it sounds, from what the applicant said, as though that will actually be part of the process, but just it will come later on. And so,
Well, we'll talk about it after. I think we need to talk as a board.
okay. So we're just going to continue to discuss, or we want to let them go ahead and then discuss the
Well, we have to,
conditions?
don't we, so we close the hearing, and then we deliberate and issue a written statement. And so far, that's kind of how we've been doing it with all this stuff sequencing up, so we'll just,
Okay. No, okay, nothing else? So I will make a motion then are we closing the hearing? Okay. I just don't have a draft decision of what to say. Closing the hearing.
Exactly. Second?
Okay, I will make a motion to close the hearing for SUB 16-02. And move that the applicant for SUB 16-02 will be authorised to prepare a final subdivision plan application with the conditions that we will set out in our written findings. Right. Thank you. All those in favour of those two motions? Aye, okay. Motion carried. Does that make sense? So we will have to think about how we want to deal with that point that's been raised, and we'll put it in writing, but essentially,
All right, thank you.
give the go-ahead.
Thanks. All right.
Okay. motion to close and then motion to grant approval. Yeah, close and, yeah. Is there any other business?
How did our pictures turn out?
It's on the
Well,
website.
I think
It's
they're
on the
on the
website.
site right
Oh,
now.
I haven't looked.
I sent them over to
All right.
They are.
and all them, so.
Yes. Okay, there's nothing else?
Yes, right?
Pardon?
Yeah, for delivered, unless they left.
I
Go
don't
check.
know.
Can we close?
Just
We
going
can't
to
close without
close the
them.
meeting without them.
We can't?
I don't know.
Gotta be
I just
rude.
meant- I was getting ahead.
We waited, we decided to stop. All right. Thanks.
Discussion that you've had on the Cheesefactory one, you kept the third condition as in the site plan with the orthographic images?
Yes, we did.
Okay. And you changed two to just include the right-of-way easements and parking.
Yeah.
Well, I suppose I should repeat the any other business call. Is there any other business? No. Then, yes, I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye.